I'm Val. I was a teacher for 7 years, and I've helped thousands of teachers pass their certification exams at 240. And today, I'm going to help you. This video is going to prepare you for the Praxis Principles of Learning and Teaching K-6 test. That's number 5622. This video is going to cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the biggest concepts that you need to master, and after that, we're going to look at a few practice questions. Who's ready to write their success story? Let's get going and write Chapter 1 together. Now, this Praxis Principles of Learning and Teaching exam consists of 5 content categories: students as learners, instructional process, assessment, professional development, leadership and community, and analysis of instructional scenarios. The questions for categories 1 through 4 are all selected response, and category 5 asks constructed response questions, which we can call CRQs for short. Selected response are multiple choice, and constructed response are like essays. The selected response questions are worth 75% of the overall score, and the CRQs are worth 25%. Even though they're worth a smaller percentage, thinking about writing essays on your exam might make you nervous. But let me show you something pretty cool. The topics you'll write your essays about match the first 4 content categories. So the studying you do for the selected response portion will also help you prepare for the CRQs. That's 240 for you, baby. We like to work smarter instead of harder. However, you will want to hear more about those CRQs, including tips for answering them. We'll circle back to that. But for now, let's get into our selected response content categories. We'll take it from the top. Category 1 is worth 22.5% of your overall score, totaling approximately 21 selected response questions in all. You'll see questions about student development and learning, diverse learners, and motivation and the learning environment. So basically, it includes everything you need to know about your students. And you also need to know how to reach all those young people as an educator. This might seem daunting, but don't worry, we'll go through it piece by piece. And don't forget to stick around because later we'll tackle a few practice questions together. But first, let's look at some topics you'll most likely see in Category 1, starting with student development and learning. In this section, you're going to focus on anything that will help students learn better. An important part of teaching goes beyond the teacher sharing specific content knowledge and focuses on teaching students how to learn. Teachers should help students develop metacognition, which is the process of thinking about one's thinking. There are several different strategies teachers can use to facilitate metacognition, such as activating prior knowledge, using graphic organizers, questioning, and annotating. But the most important thing to know about metacognition is that it helps students recognize how they learn best. While using these strategies, teachers should guide students through thinking about their thinking. Feeling warmed up? Let's keep going through Category 1. Next up is working with diverse learners. Students in your classroom will have a variety of diverse needs, and the same goes for the type of questions you'll see in this category. Expect questions about English language learners, gifted students, and students receiving 504 or special education services. Want to hear the absolute need to know for your exam about students receiving special education services? I have an idea of what to talk to you about, and that's IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA has 6 main elements, and you can find all of them in our study guides. But the most essential one for you to know on the PLT is the IEP. I liked that little acrostic we just saw. Let's do it again. IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. This is a plan created by a committee of general and special education teachers, parents, specialists, and administrators to provide a free and appropriate public education that is tailored to a student's needs and goals. IDEA mandates that all students receiving special education services should have an IEP, and that all teachers are required to follow them. Did you know interior design would be a part of your job as an educator? Really? There are important considerations to make when designing the layout of your classroom. And don't worry, your girl is an expert interior designer. Let's take a peek inside our study guide to see some common arrangements and the instructional formats they best support.
Teachers should be mindful that the student seating arrangement works in conjunction with the instructional activity. In other words, different setups lend themselves best to different tasks. When listening to any type of presentation, whether it be from the teacher, a guest speaker, or fellow classmates, students should all be able to see. Facing front typically works best. When the whole class is having a discussion, it's helpful for everyone to be seen. When collaborating on a group assignment, it's beneficial for students to sit together. The walkways should be open so the teacher can easily move to check on each group. And when the teacher is working with a small group of students, the rest of the class should still be in view.
That was some great information. And if you'd like to see more videos like that as you prepare for your exam, subscribe to a 240 study guide. Before we move on to Category 2, want to hear one more tip about creating an effective learning environment? Yeah, I thought you would. While there's a lot to consider when it comes to the physical space of a classroom, safety always comes first. Students should be able to move around the room and access needed materials safely and efficiently. So, if you see an answer choice that references making a room a safe space for students, that's usually the right one. Okay, we made it through our first category, but we're just getting warmed up. Let's move on to the other biggest chunk of the selected response portion, Category 2. It is also worth 22.5% of your overall score. Category 2 is all about instruction, as in the actual teaching you'll be doing in the classroom. In this category, you'll need to know about planning instruction, instructional strategies, and both questioning and communication techniques. Let's kick off this category by hearing a key concept on planning. Just like most parts of being a teacher, there are many factors to consider when planning instruction. And sometimes even the best plans don't go, well, according to plan. Ask yourself the following. Did most of the class greatly struggle? Teach it again, using a different approach. You may also ask yourself whether or not the expectations were clear. Did the student master everything except this one little part? Target it. Again, it's probably a good idea to rethink the approach you took the first go-around. Did most of the class demonstrate mastery? Time to move on or bump up the challenge. The most important takeaway here? Reteach in a different way when students don't understand something the first go-around. Okay, you've planned and adjusted your instruction. Now, how are you going to deliver it? There are many strategies you can use to deliver quality instruction. Let's discuss one that's bound to come up on your exam. We've established that planning is important, and it definitely is, but some of the most authentic teaching happens when the lesson gets off track. A teachable moment is an unexpected opportunity to teach something new. Teachers should capitalize on these. A teachable moment may come in the form of a student question, like a student who comes into a science class after getting a flu shot and asks how vaccines work. It could also be in response to something else unexpected, like a typo in the heading of a news article that prompts a mini lesson on apostrophes. Teachable moments are powerful because they present authentic learning opportunities that are immediately meaningful and relevant to students. Questioning is such an important strategy to use throughout instruction that it gets its own part of the category. Do you want to know a great framework to use throughout instructional process, including questioning? Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is used to classify educational learning objectives into levels of complexity and specificity. The levels are modeled as a pyramid, starting with foundational skills at the base and increasing in rigor as they work their way up that particular skill or concept. When thinking about questioning, answering a question towards the bottom of the pyramid would require basic fact recall, such as, what are some resources provided in your community? Whereas higher level thinking is required as you move up the pyramid with a question like, how would you improve your community? Want more practice identifying levels of Bloom? We have it covered for you in our study guide. Here's some good news. We've almost made it through Category 2. Let's finish it out. You'll also see questions about effective communication in the category about instruction. And it makes sense because in the classroom, communication is key. And we have the perfect video for highlighting some of the most important things to know about communication in your exam. Now, I was just supposed to show you one video snippet from our study guide, but what the heck? I like you guys. Just don't tell my boss.
Communication with students must be clear and specific. Remember, students don't know what they don't know. For the classroom to run smoothly, students must clearly understand expectations and directions. Teachers need to clearly communicate what they want students to do and how the students are supposed to make it happen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. How are we feeling? A little overwhelmed? Well, I have some good news for you. We have everything you need to gain the confidence you deserve to pass your exam in our study guide. It is self-paced, so you can work through as much or little as you need to at a time to feel truly prepared. Plus, have I mentioned it comes with a money-back guarantee? It does. All right, next category, here we come. Category 3 is all about assessment. It is worth 15% of your overall score, totaling around 14 selected response questions in all. So yeah, part of your assessment is about assessment. This category is broken up by evaluation strategies and assessment tools. Let's talk about evaluation strategies first. A big part of this portion is being able to match an objective to an assessment. I'll give you an example. Let's say you need to collect assessment data on your students' reading fluency. A running record is the way to go. This assessment aligns best with the objective because notes can be made as a student reads aloud to collect data on their fluency. Let's stay on this assessment train and ride it home. In the assessment tools portion, you'll need to know more assessment terminology. Expect to see vocabulary like percentile rank, stay 9, formative, summative, norm referenced, and criterion referenced on your exam. Let's dig into these two. Criterion referenced assessments compare student performance to a predetermined standard, which is a criteria. Scores on these types of tests come in a form of percentage. Tests administered at the end of an instructional unit and state achievement tests are common examples. Norm reference assessments compare students to each other and rank them according to performance. Scores on these types of tests come in a form of percentile, grade level equivalency, or stay 9 using a normal bell-shaped curve. Common examples include the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or SAT, and Intelligent Quotient, IQ test. To sum this up, criterion reference assessments looks at how students perform against a set criteria. Norm reference assessment looks at how students perform against the normal curve. And those are some need-to-knows for Category 3. We've made it to the last selected response category. Category 4 covers professional development, leadership, and community, and is worth the same amount of your overall score as Category 3, at 15%. Here, you'll need to know about collaboration, both with other professionals and students' families. You'll also see questions about improving your practice as a teacher, including specific vocabulary related to professional development. One of the terms to watch for is academic journal. You may love to peruse teaching blogs or chat with fellow educators and an online community for ideas, and that's great. But on this exam, resources for professional development should be backed by research. That's why we like academic journals. We've made it through the whole selected response portion. Now who's ready to write a quick essay? The last category, analysis of instructional scenarios, is the one made up of constructed response questions, or CRQs. Remember that this category makes up 25% of your overall score. I'm going to explain what the questions will look like and give you some tips to use when answering them. Plus, we'll look at a sample question and answer it together. You will be given 2 case histories, or in-depth scenarios. Each scenario will be followed by 2 questions for you to answer. Furthermore, each question may have up to 2 parts. That's kind of a lot under those umbrellas. Don't worry, I got you covered. The first thing to do once you've read the case history scenario is note the grade level or ability of the students. Also, pay attention to any specific context you are given, such as a particular subject area, parent meeting, or health concern. Your responses can be brief and straight to the point. We recommend writing 1 to 2 paragraphs for each question. Oh, and be as specific as possible. Now, let's get into our tips for what exactly to write. There are tons of possibilities for the kinds of questions you'll get or what your case histories will be about. But remember at the beginning of the video when I told you that the topics for the CRQs are the same as the first 4 content categories? I'm going to give you a key tip for answering questions about each of those topics. Starting with students as learners. One thing you might be asked about is learning theories, so it's a good idea to review terms related to that, such as metacognition and zone of proximal development. The best responses to questions about this topic are student-centered. Always keep your focus on what's best for the students. Something that may come up under instructional process is learning objectives. So we recommend you practice writing measurable objectives and review some strategies to directly achieve those objectives. If your CRQ is about assessment, it's highly likely that you'll be asked about different types of assessments, or you'll have to choose which one should be used in a given scenario. Make sure to review formal and informal, summative and formative, diagnostic, criterion referenced, and norm referenced assessments. Assessment is all about data. Top responses in this category point out the specific evidence given in the scenario to support their answer. Finally, if your question is about professional development, leadership, and community, you may be asked about teachers' reflective practice. Be prepared to write about reflective journals, assessment data, peer observation, and portfolios. Now, that was only one tip for each topic. We have lots more in the 240 study guide, so you can feel prepared no matter what kind of constructed response questions you get. Now, let's look at a sample question to put all of these tips into action. Here's the scenario. Okay, so we're talking about second grade, planning a science unit. The teacher's writing lesson plans, so this sounds like the instructional process topic. Now, we get some detailed information. Here's a teacher's 2-week unit plan. I'm noticing that she's starting with physical properties in the first week, then moving on to states of matter. And there are 3 applicable second grade standards. The next part of the case study gives us a detailed 1-day lesson plan. You can pause to read this, but we recommend just skimming it to familiarize yourself with it. Then once you read the question, you can go back and look for specifics that you need to focus on. Okay, here's the question we need to answer. Focusing on the state standards and the 1-day lesson plan, we need to choose 2 parts of the plan that could be improved. And we need to give specific examples of changes that could be made. There's likely more than one correct answer here, but I'm going to show you one strong response. After looking over the lesson plan again, you may notice that the objectives could be improved. Remember earlier when I said to practice writing measurable learning objectives? These ain't it. They need to be more specific, and the whole group section could use some improvement. She's going over great content, but it's a lot of direct instruction. Remember before when I said keep it student-centered? I think we could use a bit more active learning here. Okay, we've identified our 2 areas for improvement. Let's write our response, making sure we include specific examples so we get credit for both parts of the question. Here's the first paragraph about improving the learning objectives. It clearly states why it needs to be improved and gives specific examples of how to fix it. And here's the second paragraph. It gets right to the point and again, uses specific examples. So that's it. Now, on your exam, that case study would have a second question to answer too. We don't have time to answer another one, but the good news is the 240 study guides have even more practice prompts just like this, so you have all the practice you need. Now that you've gotten some practice with constructed response questions, let's look at some selected response questions. These practice questions will show you how concepts 1 through 4 can appear on the test. If you want a lot of practice questions, you can click the free practice test in the description. After you see how you did on that test, you'll know exactly what you need to study in the guide. Now for questions. Let's start back at the beginning with students as learners. Here's an example from the Development and Learning section. Remember metacognition? Which of the following examples would best help students to improve their skills of metacognition? A and B allow students to be creative and have ownership over their learning experience, which are both great ideas, but neither help with metacognition, so they're out. Creating lessons that relate to different learning styles is also a great practice in the classroom, but it doesn't require students to think about their own learning, so we can get rid of that one too. Choice D is best. By asking students to think about which strategies would work best with a new assignment, you're asking students to understand how to organize material for their own consumption. While metacognition is important, there's so much more to this section. Luckily, the study guide has it all for you. Next up, diverse learners. Ooh, here's a great example focusing on creating an IEP. Remember, even if you're not a special education teacher, you may spend time on an IEP team for your students. When deciding the least restrictive environment, LRE, for a student with disabilities, what should the IEP team consider? The best answer is this one. In order to create the least restrictive environment for a student, the frequency, location, duration, and intensity of the identified services the student requires need to be considered. Let's move into category 2, the instructional process. How about a question on strategies? As Ms. Harrigan is teaching about alternatives to fossil fuels, a student speaks up complaining that alternative sources are not a good idea because they cost more. Which response would best lead the class through a learning experience related to this objection? This one is tough. I can see most of these being used in the classroom, but one answer is definitely best here. By choosing choice A, incorporating the question into a future lesson, Ms. Harrigan not only shows respect for the student who asked the question, but gives herself time to investigate the question, and gives the class an opportunity to make a cost-benefit comparison of alternative fuels. She also takes advantage of a teachable moment. So A is best. Nice. Let's tackle one more from this competency. Ooh, remember Bloom's taxonomy? The third grade teachers at Treasure Forest Elementary School are planning a unit on Thomas Jefferson. They want to challenge their students using higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, so they are brainstorming ideas to replace their current activities. Which of these requires the highest level of thinking? You know what? Let's just order all of these choices from lowest to highest according to Bloom's. Choice A is going to land in either the remember or understand level of Bloom's, depending on the type of question asked. So it is at the bottom. Choice B will come next because it requires students to apply their knowledge. Next, choice D is asking students to analyze their traits compared to Jefferson. So we're getting closer to the top. Choice C is best. This requires students to evaluate the character of Jefferson and to create an original essay. Evaluating and creating are the two highest levels in Bloom's taxonomy. 2 categories down, 2 to go. Moving on to assessment. Remember when we listed off all of those assessment types you needed to know? Let's see what you got. Which of the following is an example of a formative assessment? Formative assessments measure learning as it is formed and can help you adjust your lessons to meet your students where they're at. So A is the best choice. Using an exit ticket will give a teacher a quick look into how their students are progressing. Like I mentioned before, there are a ton of assessment types. In order to learn all of the types you could see on the test, make sure you subscribe to our study guide. Last category, PD, leadership, and community. Let's see a question on collaborating with your teacher peers. Which of the following best promotes professional collaboration and mutual support? A lot of these look good, but we can knock out A right away. We love to see some peer tutoring, but that's kid collaboration. We need a choice about adults. Now, the 3 remaining choices could all be considered collaboration, but the key here is mutual support. So while C and D are both great practices, they're probably required by the district. Choice B here is best. Examples like the art teacher leading a unit that focuses on the same time period as the students are currently learning about in history shows professional collaboration and mutual support. And that's the last of our practice questions, but there's still plenty more to learn. Did you know that thousands of teachers have used 240 to help them pass their exams? If you really want to make sure you're prepared for the Praxis Principles of Learning and Teaching grades K-6 exam, take the next step and subscribe to 240 Study Guide. It has hours of video so you can watch and or listen as you please. It is test aligned with hundreds of practice questions so you know precisely what you need to study. And it has a money-back guarantee. So click the link below right now to get started.